What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Now, this is a video I meant to do yesterday, but just forgot to do it. So, I want to talk about how misinformed a lot of so-called basketball historians are, or just people that talk basketball in general are, when it comes to talking about yesteryear. You always hear, Wilt played against 6'4" white, you can't use that term really anymore, the N word. Or, George Michael played against guys that would be shorter than guards today, and all this nonsense. First of all, I don't understand. Well, actually, I do. I didn't used to understand it, but now I do. But, at one point, I didn't understand why so many young people today just reflexively enjoy crapping on players of the past. But then it dawned on me. The reason why a lot of these guys do that is because a lot of them have daddy issues. A lot of them have daddy issues. A lot of them have issues with older males because they come from a single-parent household. Now, look, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because there have been a lot of great women who raised boys and girls and done a great job. But I do believe that a boy needs to have a male figure in his life. He has to have some type of father figure, some type of male figure, even if it's her brothers or somebody. You know what I mean? Because if not, she can do as good a job as she wants to. That boy's going to grow up with a lot of feminine energy. And he's not going to know how to deal with certain things that are different from being a female. A female can kind of rant and rave about a lot of stuff, and it's taken a different way. A 6'5", 250-pound man doing the same thing who's black, well, you'll learn how society treats you. But I'm going into a tangent about something else, okay? It's not intentional. It's just that I think there's a connection between why a lot of these guys who look up to LeBron James, because he comes from a single-parent household, they treat him like a god, but they don't care for older generation males. And you got to look at the fact that the NBA, its fan base is 45% African American. So let me get to the point. You'll hear people say, well, George Michael went up against guys that were shorter than guards today. The reality is, during George Michael's heyday in the early to mid 1950s, the average center was 6'8" to 6'9" in height. Today, the average center is about 6'10.5". That's not much of a difference. So, despite all of this crap about evolution and all this shit, over a 70-year span, the average center is only 1 to 2 inches, at best 2.5 inches taller. Which brings me to compare him to Shaq. Compare Michael to Shaq. Because if the average center today is 6'10", when Shaq played, the average center was 6'10". Shaq was 7 feet, right? But in shoes listed 7'1", correct? So let's just go with 7'1". Doesn't that mean that Shaq had, on average, a 3-inch height advantage over the average center? A 3-inch height advantage. Let alone that when he first came to the NBA, he was already pushing 300 pounds then, 296. By 1997, with the Lakers, Shaq was already 330. And when he was in shape in 2000, he was 340. But as we all know, Shaq was coming into training camp as heavy as 395. And then working his way down to 360, 350 throughout the year toward the last part of the Laker years. So, do you think any center was coming anywhere close to that? The closest any center was coming to that was Brian Big Country Reeves who was out of shape, 310, and maybe George Mirasan, who had the mobility of goddamn Frankenstein, and maybe an old Arvydas Sabonis, who's 300 maybe, 295. Nobody else is coming close to that. Mikan was about 260, 270 at his peak. Right? The average center maybe 205, 210, 215. So, yeah, Mikan had an edge of maybe 50 to 60 pounds. But Shaq had an edge at times of, on the average center, pushing 100 pounds. So what I'm getting at is, Mikan was 6'10", the average center 6'8", 6'9". So he had an inch to an inch and a half, maybe 2 inch height advantage over most bigs. Shaq 3 inches. So Shaq had a bigger size advantage on average than every other center than Mikan. But nobody does that to Shaq. Nobody tries to disqualify Shaq from his dominance because of his size. But with Mikan, with faulty information, you try to do that to George Mikan. And that's the problem I have with a lot of people. They don't know what they're talking about. So, just wanted to put that out there. By the way, to give you an idea about how dominant George Mikan was, it was George Mikan. Because before George Mikan, and I know people are going to have a hard time believing this, but before George Mikan, there was this belief that big people couldn't be good at basketball. As hard as it is to believe. If you look at some of those old semi-pro leagues, the tallest player on the team, and yeah, they were some of those white teams, but the average center was maybe 6'5", because there was a belief then that centers, like people over 6'7", 6'8", certainly 7 feet tall, or approaching 7 feet tall, they didn't have the coordination to be basketball players. George Mikan broke that mold. All right, George Mikan broke that mold. George Mikan dominated college. It was because of George Mikan that college but curtailed shot blocking to the point where they created goaltending. George Mikan also was the reason why they created goaltending in the NBA. And George Mikan had years when he was averaging 27, 28 points per game for a Lakers team that was only averaging 75, 80 points a game. So that shows you how dominant he was. The game was totally different. You couldn't look at field goal percentages. You couldn't look at all this stuff because the game was just played differently. But anyway, I just want to put that out there. Tell me what you guys think.